Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Grandview Heights Board of Education on Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. We are holding this meeting using video conferencing technology. The Ohio General Assembly and Attorney General have approved the use of virtual meetings as a viable alternative to conducting public meetings during this time, and the district's alternative complies with these directives. We will be broadcasting this meeting via our Grandview Heights YouTube channel. The link to the channel is currently available on the district's website. This live stream is being recorded and will be available on the district's website. We do provide for public participation at our board regularly scheduled board meetings. We do have 3 folks, I believe, that have signed up for this evening. For future meetings, we just ask you to contact us by 5 p.m. that day so we can make sure that you have the access to do so. Please be advised that Board of Education meetings are not hearings, they are meetings. We are in full compliance with House Bill 197 by having our meetings live stream so members of the public can observe and hear discussions and deliberations of the board. So Beth, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bodie?
Here.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Here.
Mr. Gousset?
Here.
Mr. Truitt?
Here.
And Ms. Wasmuth?
Here.
Next on the agenda is our recognition and presentations. We have 5 items. This evening, we do not have any items under A, so I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Culp, for item B.
Good evening, board members, staff, and community members. January was officially Board Recognition Month. In an effort to bring relevancy, earnest appreciation, and deserved and sincere gratitude on this occasion, I prepared a few words for our collective board to capture our appreciation for all of your selfless leadership and service. First, on behalf of the entire Grandview Heights School District students and staff, Grandview Heights and Marble Cliff community, thank you to each one of you for your service, your courage, your leadership, your dedication, your consummate preparation, and desire to do right by all students. School board members exemplify local citizenship control and decision-making in education. They volunteer hundreds of hours and an immeasurable amount of energy to ensure that our schools are providing the best education possible for the children of our community. For all of their dedication, we are taking this opportunity to show them our appreciation during School Board Recognition Month. School board members are citizens whose decisions affect our children, what they learn, who will teach them, and what kinds of facilities house their classrooms. These are the men and women elected to establish the policies that provide the framework for our public schools. They represent you. They take this responsibility exceedingly seriously by attending lengthy, sometimes challenging meetings, conferences, and institutes where they broaden their knowledge about education during numerous conversations about the schools and sessions before the Ohio General Assembly. So again, thank you. I have a firsthand view of the hours of analysis and preparation. I see the late night calls, the earnest and genuine desire to get it right for our students. I see the desire by each one of you to get it right for our community. I see the desire and reflection that all of you engage in earnest and genuine dialogue. It has been a dream come true to serve as your superintendent, and therefore it is with great humility that I thank each one of you for your service to this community, this district, our parents, and most important of all, our students. Thank you for your leadership and service above self, such that Grandview Heights Schools is truly a small place to dream big. Jesse Truitt has been a member of the Grandview Heights Board of Education since 2014. He was reelected to the Board of Education in November 2017 and thus is serving his second term. In January 2020, Jesse was elected president of the Board of Education and reelected president in January 2021. Beginning in 2015, Eric Bodie served as a community member on the school district's facility task force, advising the superintendent during the facility planning process. He previously served on the superintendent's legislative committee. He is serving his first term on the Board of Education, having been elected in November 2017. In January 2020, Eric was elected vice president of the school board and reelected vice president in January 2021. Molly is serving her first term on the Board of Education, having been elected in November 2017. Emily Gephardt, elected in November 2019, is also serving his first term. Kevin Gousset, elected in 2019, is serving his first term. On behalf of everyone associated with Grandview Heights, a heartfelt and sincere and genuine thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Andy, for those very kind words. Much appreciated, I'm sure, by the entire board. Next on our agenda, we have recognition of guests and hearing of the public. As I mentioned in the opening, I believe we do have several people who have expressed desire to speak tonight. As just a reminder, the board recognizes the value of public comment to school governance. For those of you that wish to address the board, you may speak now or directly before the action item you would like to address. A copy of the board policy on public participation is in the meeting packet. When addressing the board, please state your name and address for the record. Limit comments to 5 minutes or less. Direct statements to the board. Do not mention students or staff by name, and maintain reasonable decorum. The board will hear statements but will not answer questions or engage in debate during the board meeting. I, as board president, Andy Culp as superintendent, Beth Collier as treasurer, are willing to meet with any member of the public to answer specific questions individually pertaining to Grandview Heights School. So at this point, Haley, I believe you have some folks lined up.
Yes, Mr. Truitt, this evening we have 3 registered participants for public participation. Our first participant is Adam Smith.
Good evening, Adam.
Adam, you should be able to unmute.
There we go. You guys hear me okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. So good evening. My name is Adam Smith. I'm going to try to keep this as short as I can, but I'm a Grandview resident. And by way of background, my wife and I have 5 kids in the district, 1 in each school and 1 in each building. We're both lawyers in Columbus and participate in the district. We highly value education. We do fundraising. We volunteer. We're in social events. And we participate and donate in the Grandview Foundation. So what I'm doing today, speaking to a forum like this, is not typical for me. I don't seek confrontation or the spotlight. And I think those who know me know that I'm a reasonable person. So it's an extraordinary step for me. Certainly some will not agree with my statements, and some may even be upset with me. But I remain confident those who know me and Karen will understand what we are doing and what we are doing we think is right. I've tried to address, and I will in a minute, my concerns through the proper diplomatic channels with the board, but that's really not worked. Unfortunately, I'm left with no choice but to speak up publicly, and I can no longer sit back and watch the district damage our kids, damage my kids, watch our kids suffering with the status of the situation and the value that the way the board has handled things. So action must be taken, and I think voices must be heard. I really take no pleasure in what I'm about to say, but I think it's long overdue. As I mentioned, and I'm sure I'm going to make some enemies here, and I can live with that because I really think at this point in time, it's time to do the right thing, not what's convenient or easy. Unfortunately, I believe the board has failed. You failed the community, you failed the district, you failed the parents, the property owners who pay for these schools, and most importantly, you failed our students. You have not led. You failed as your constitutional duty to educate our kids. By way of background, I'm not speaking today as a first-time complainer, someone coming out of left field to critique this board. I really do, and a group of us have approached Andy and the board members back in July to voice our concerns and offer input on ways to properly educate our kids in this challenging school year. We continue to write letters, make calls, send emails, ask questions, offer to meet, to offer alternative plans to Andy and the board, and those have had no success. And in fact, at this point in time, our group has only grown in size and frustration. To say that we were ignored, I think, is being nice. I'd say that we were placated and disregarded and in some fashion rebuffed. Communications from the board consist mainly of canned emails vetted by counsel, I'm sure. If this is the way that board members treat community folks who are friendly, genuinely interested in a meaningful discussion on ways to better educate our kids in schools that we pay for, I hesitate to wonder what happens to those who don't. I want to make one thing clear. This statement is not a reflection of the teachers and the staff in the schools. I think our teachers and staff are some of the best around. Many are personal friends, neighbors, and peers. I believe the board has hamstrung these teachers and forced them to try to teach in impossible circumstances. Mine and many others' issues really is with the board, and frankly, the lack of adaptability, flexibility, and inability for the board to be bold and lead. We hide behind Zoom calls and screen time, instead of engaging the community, a small one at that, and trying to educate our kids. We've had 11 months to come up with a game plan to get our kids back to school full time. Many of us now call what you call hybrid half school. It's 3 hours a week, if we're lucky, followed by homeschooling by the parents after hours. To date, the last email from Andy was another canned email stating that don't get your hopes up for the vaccine. There's no promises and no plan for a return. A website for a dashboard is not a return to school plan. It's a lazy way to keep us all at bay without making a stand on any position. I think I'm a relatively intelligent person. I can understand numbers and data, but the dashboard data to me seems like simply we're flooding the zone with information. No logical connection, mostly inapplicable to our area and our school, simply ways to say you provided information without direction, without a plan or a pathway to normalcy. That's not leadership. As of today, the Department of Education in Ohio has 395 school districts back to full-time in-person learning. That doesn't count any private schools, almost all of which are back in person. Why, as one of the smallest districts in our area, are we not back to full-time learning or even have a plan to do so? Westerville, Olentangy, Hilliard, they're all going back full-time in March. Where is our plan? What are we waiting for? We have a low number of students. We have the space. We have the resources to do so. Where is our plan? I hear in these emails that you guys are concerned with the safety and wellness of the students, and that's the number one priority. Where does education fit in? Number two? Number three? Of course, safety is an issue, but isn't education the number one issue? Isn't that what we pay for? I have another concern the board needs to think about, and I'm not sure you have. What about the mental health, the sanity, stability, certainty, and human and social interaction for our kids? Where is the board's concern for these things? I see my kids suffering, crying, begging for social interaction, not a silly computer screen. We are killing our kids with this method. We are making them robots to a screen, making them slaves to their homes, making them feel guilty for interacting with others, afraid they're going to go out and, quote, kill somebody. All this data the board sends out, where is the data on kids getting sick? I mean, just normally sick, let alone hospitalized or God forbid, dying. I see none of it. I see no such data. I have heard of no child in our community being hospitalized from COVID, let alone sick. I've done my research. Kids have a almost 0% risk of severe illness or hospitalization. There are no studies showing kids are active transmitters of the virus. In Ohio, the average age of getting COVID is 42 years old. That's a far, far cry from a school-age child. The CDC says return to school. Fauci says return to school. DeWine says return to school. Almost every medical committee and advisory board in America says return to school. Today, the Ohio Department of Education superintendent issued a resolution saying return to school. Our teachers are being vaccinated. Where is our plan for return? Of course, there's going to be those who disagree with me, and that's fine. They have that right. They have that option. Their option is virtual learning. Those of us who want our kids to go back full time, we have no option at the present. This is a one-sided plan. It only works for those who remain in hybrid or remote. Where is our choice? Where are you addressing the large number of us who want to return to full-time school? I can tell you my feelings and concerns are not exclusively mine. There are many, many others that feel the same way, and I can tell you our numbers are growing. This board is failing our kids in this model. You are denying them their guaranteed education, denying them mental well-being and social normacy for a risk of an illness that is negligible to them and most around them. At this point, the damage to the medical or to the mental well-being and educational standards for our kids far, far outweighs the risk of any physical illness. Many in this community are tired of hiding behind screens and Zoom calls. I can tell you the anger is real and the mistrust of this board grows. You are losing the support of this district. It's time to stop the bleeding. The board should be ahead of the curve, not chasing it. You have all the resources. You have the community support other districts only dream of. If you're not willing to take the lead, perhaps it's time to let someone else do so. That's okay. Our kids' well-being is at stake here. It's time for the board to do its job, to lead with vision, be bold, and be courageous. open up our schools full time now. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Mr. Truitt,
Yes.
our second speaker tonight, if you're so ready,
Yes, absolutely.
is Brandon Strong.
Thank you. Good evening, Brandon.
Good evening. So my name is Brandon Strong. I live at 1230 Glen Avenue. I have one child in school in 3rd grade. Board members and Mr. Culp, thank you for letting me speak with you this evening. I wanted to talk to the board, urging them to make the transition from hybrid to full-time school, either the week of March 15th or the week of March 29th, after teachers and staff are successfully vaccinated. I remember sitting in on these virtual board meetings last summer as the board tried to come up with a plan for the current school year. At that time, we didn't know much about the transmission of the virus, the effects on children, nor did we want to put our teachers in harm's way. Additionally, Dawn and I were very apprehensive about sending our son back to school. We have stood by and supported the decisions the district has made up to this point. I want to make it clear that by no means am I discounting that COVID cannot be deadly, because it can, and it has been to many families across the country and world. What I think is that we need to change our risk calculus. Have we reached a point that the academic, social, and emotional risk to our children continuing in hybrid is greater than the risk of them going to school full time? I am concerned that we could be if we don't get this accomplished by the end of this academic year. So I think we need to weigh the risks from both perspectives. At the end of February, almost all the staff in our district will be vaccinated. While I know this doesn't mean that they cannot get nor transmit the virus, I do know that it does mean that the serious health consequences are significantly diminished. We also know that there have been districts, both public, for example, the Granville School District, and private, that have been in school full time during this entire school year. And largely the health effects haven't been substantial. Are we reaching out and talking to these districts to get information and data that will help our decision? Additionally, Upper Arlington School District is planning to return to full-time school after their spring break. So perhaps that is another district that we could reach out to and discuss their plan and how we could modify it to fit our district. We also know that in the state of Ohio, that the most vulnerable are getting or have been vaccinated, thus further reducing the risk to our most vulnerable in our communities. So when I say changing risk calculus, I think we need to give greater weight to the risk posed to our children's academic and social lives if we do not get them back in school full time. I also know parents in this community seriously contemplating sending their children to private education if the school cannot get back to full time. What will this do to our tight-knit community, our athletic, and our social gatherings? I believe that these are all factors that need to be considered. Therefore, tonight, I ask the board to give weight to not just health concerns, which are important, but also other relative concerns that I mentioned. I would hope that the board and Mr. Culp can give a promise to the community that they are working towards full-time academics by the end of this year, if not before. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Mr. Truitt,
Yes.
our third registered public participation speaker is Joanne Taylor.
Good evening, Joanne.
Hello, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna shift veins if that's okay. I come before you tonight to talk as part of One Grandview. And just to give a little backstory to anybody who's listening or anybody on the board, One Grandview is composed of some Grandview teachers and Grandview parents. We formed last May 2020, after a series of events across our nation. Had some of us so disturbed that we felt we needed to do something. And so we like to see ourselves like a Start Talking Grandview, except for social justice. We, in the fall, did a survey to parents, staff, and students just to get some ideas of what people's feelings were. Were we off base? Were we close to base? Where did we need to go? We have spent a lot of time meeting, strategizing, and just to get right to the point, one of the things we have come up with that I believe you guys have before you is a resolution for the Grandview Heights Board of Education condemning racism and committing to being an anti-racist school district. Not only do we feel this is important, just a little bit of history to go along with this. The city of Grandview last year declared the year of 2021 to be the year of racial justice learning. And so we thought this was a good tie into that, as in also One Grandview working with the schools in conjunction with the city. Our public library, the Grandview Public Library, is also very vested in being an anti-racist establishment and helping our community in any way. The Grandview Board of Health last summer also declared racism is a public health crisis. We are releasing our survey results. We are working on a website and hope within the next couple weeks to have the results up there. Overwhelmingly, people feel that Grandview, the schools are doing great things. And I want to be clear, we're not trying to do something radical or force beliefs down people's throats. All we are trying to do is build upon the learning attributes that Grandview schools already have in place. And there are learning attributes in each building that those schools take a lot of time to ingrain into the students to make them better humans. So honestly, Grandview schools have already laid the groundwork, and we're just building upon what you guys are already doing. So we ask that you would consider declaring this resolution so that we could be an anti-racist school district.
Thank you, Joanne.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was our last public participation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'd like to propose, I know that there are a large amount of people watching this board meeting, and so I'd like to propose a certain order that I think makes some logical sense. I would like to jump to the resolution right now that Joanne was speaking to and ask the board to consider taking action on that. Then we will have a very brief construction update from Jay to Dina, and then we will jump into what could potentially be a lengthy discussion about the learning modes, full-time versus hybrid. So for those of you that are watching, we will get to those things. It's sometimes it's hard when we talk about 4 topics and then jump through. So let's talk about the resolution that Joanne presented, then we'll do a quick construction update, and then we will jump into a discussion about our framework and our learning modality. Does that work for everyone on the board? Okay, which basically follows our agenda. So I would like under 6, action taken by the Board of Education, a resolution of the Grandview Heights Board of Education condemning racism and committing to being an anti-racist school district. Whereas systematic racism has long led to political, physical, economic, and educational harm to people of color in the United States. And whereas the Ohio Board of Education adopted a resolution on July 14th, 2020, condemning racism and strongly recommend that all Ohio school districts begin a reflective and internal examination of their own, involving members of their community to examine all facets of the school operations. And whereas the Grandview Heights School District is committed to fostering a learning community which benefits the holistic growth of all of our students, and whereas the district recognizes its need to confront systemic racism and proactively teach anti-racism to achieve this goal, now therefore it be resolved by the Grandview Heights Board of Education on this day, February 10th, 2021, that the district condemns racism, racial violence, white supremacy, hate speech, and bigotry in all forms inside and outside of our schools. And the district commits to a careful examination of institutional policies and practices in order to establish an anti-racist community and dismantle systemic racism in our schools. And the district affirms the importance of a culturally responsive curriculum that represents the diversity of our country, accurately honors the contributions of historically marginalized communities, and encourages anti-racism. We acknowledge our current curriculum does not achieve that yet and commit to supporting teachers and staff as they work towards this goal. And the district believes that having a diverse faculty and staff provides significant value to all students and will examine recruitment, hiring, and retention practices to broaden the representation of diversity in the district. And the district will commit to re-examine student discipline policies and records, recognizing that school discipline policies can have a disproportionately negative impact on children of color. And the district will commit to re-examine staff professional development, content, and practices, ensuring opportunities to identify implicit biases and support every child's emotional, mental, and physical needs. So I would ask for a motion to approve that resolution as read.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? I'm sorry that took a minute to read, but in the virtual environment, I felt it was important that that was in front of everybody.
Just quickly to say thank you to Joanne and the whole One Grandview team for your work and for being, collaboratively and I think very thoughtfully as you laid out, going step by step and working. And I think you're correct in saying, this really builds on the direction that the school has been heading, but we all have more to go and more to learn. I really like that the resolution focuses on some very practical things, recruitment and professional development, discipline, that are very much at the core of what we do as a school. And also just really affirming that, it's not just about not being racist, it's about being anti-racist. I think that's an important term for our society right now. So thank you for bringing this forward. And, I think it's the right thing at the right time.
An important note is the district has been doing some of this work. I do know that we'll have some presentations at board meetings later this spring that really allow us as a board and the public to see what some of that work has been so far. So I'm excited and look forward to that at future meetings. There's no other discussion. Beth, can you call the roll for approval of that resolution?
Mr. Bodie,
Aye.
Mrs. Gebhardt,
Aye.
Mr. Gousset,
Aye.
Mr. Truitt,
Aye.
and Ms. Wasmith.
Static, aye.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to jump to Jay Tadina to do a quick construction update, and then immediately after that, we will jump into the discussion of our learning modalities. So I believe Jay is leading that discussion.
Hey, good evening. Hi. Sorry, I'm in my basement where we're thinking about painting the walls, so this was the best spot I could find for this evening, so you'll have to bear with me. Apologize for that. Through the weather that we've had these past couple of weeks, we've actually made some fantastic progress on the inside of the building. It doesn't look like much has changed probably from the outside, but from the inside, I think the district and anybody that's able to take a tour and see the progress we've made would be pleased. There's a lot of drywall on the second floor, and the first floor is really starting to take shape with all the stud walls that we're installing right now. So, as we catch a break in the weather, you'll be able to see a lot of progress with the exterior. The windows I've said this last month, but they are coming this month. They're scheduled to ship on the 19th of February, and we'll start to see some going in on the west elevation probably either the week of the 22nd or the week after that. So that will be some good progress there. Through the leadership of Andy and Rob Brown and Brett Bradley, Doug Addis, we've had some great proactive thinking about how we transition into phase 2 when we complete the new middle school. So we've met and discussed what's going to come over to the new building, what's going to go into storage, and what the expectations are when after graduation. I think May 26th or maybe May 29th, somewhere around in there. But yeah, a lot of action still running at 80 to 90 guys a day, and thinking ahead, thinking towards what this summer looks like when we turn over the building. Any questions? Did I leave anything out? Oh, COVID, no real COVID-19s. Our skylights are delayed until March, but we're able to absorb that delay. They were supposed to come this month as well, but the vendor had to shut down a mill, and they're back ordered, but it's only been a month impact so far.
Any questions for Jay? Jay, I appreciate and want everybody to realize that we get those weekly reports, sort of the one pager that's pretty detailed and has some pictures, and those are posted on the website too. So that's a really good way for anybody to follow the progress of the project. It's clear where we're behind, where we're ahead, and so
Yeah.
those are much appreciated. I know by the board, but I'd imagine by others too. So
Totally. I'll share that with Colleen as well. I know that she works hard on those each week.
those are definitely used. So
Oh, yeah.
any other questions
Thanks.
for Jay or the
Thanks for the
construction?
compliment.
All right, then we'll move on. Mr. Culp, I'm going to turn over to you to lead this discussion. I believe you have some things to present to us, and we will get into it.
Yeah, so first off, just bear with me here. I'm going to spend some time talking at you and building up towards garnering feedback and perspective from all 5 of the board members about a possible all-in return. Similar to pretty much all of our Board of Education meetings for the last year, I wanted to provide a COVID-19 update, as well as engage the board in a conversation around consideration and the timeline for an all-in return. As the board knows, we have established Grandview Heights COVID-19 Learning Mode Framework 2.0. Wanted to provide a COVID-19 update, discuss the current framework, and then garner additional feedback from the board about their thoughts for consideration of an all-in return. So a couple just facts, and by and large, all really, really good news. Currently, our dashboard for Grandview Heights schools indicates that we have 2 total positive COVID cases and 8 quarantines. The positivity rate has dropped significantly in the last 3 weeks. It is down to 8.1%, down last week from 9.6. So we're seeing a really strong trend downward in our positivity rate for the good. Again, down to 8.1%. Our case rates in Franklin County have also dropped significantly in the last 3 weeks. We're down today to 414 per 100,000 is a 2-week average. Last week it was 550. Again, that 414 is a significant drop for the good. Our CATS data, which monitors our school boundaries for COVID positive, is a little higher than what Franklin County case rates are. We're sitting around 632 per 100,000. So we're going to continue to monitor that. Importantly, and new to Grandview Heights and really many school districts across Franklin County, staff vaccine administration of the Pfizer through Kroger has gone very, very well. Round 2 will begin Tuesday, February 23rd and go through Saturday, February 27th. Around 90% of our staff will have been vaccinated. This is clearly a huge mitigation with and for our staff from COVID-19. As mentioned earlier, case rates and positivity rates continue to drop by a dramatic rate. Based on the research I've done, the research around those vaccinated being carriers and or spreaders is still not fully understood. In other words, one of the questions I'm personally curious about and have asked a myriad of experts and sought out is this idea of whether if you've been vaccinated, can you be a carrier spreader of the vaccine? And quite candidly, the prevailing view is it's just not known. It's not fully understood yet whether you will or won't carry or spread COVID-19. The research around the benefits of students being in school full-time, socially, emotionally, behaviorally, and academically are clear. And something that this Board of Education has indicated is a priority and have discussed many, many times in many, many board meetings. I think of equal importance as we think about this framework that we've created. Importantly, it is just that. It is a framework. It is not a binding decision tree. We've been very, very exhaustively, in my judgment, clear about the fact that this is but a framework designed to trigger a deeper dive and discussion of understanding about what we are seeing and why we are seeing it. It is in no way binding. Furthermore, things like vaccination of staff and new clear research around not seeing links spread in school settings is all new data and information. The board governance team leadership team has been reviewing and discussing an all-in return to school based on the decrease in numbers and the fact that 90% of our staff will have been vaccinated by Saturday, February 27th. The Ohio Board of Education today, in fact, released a declaration of support for an all-in return. The highlights basically read, now therefore be it resolved that the board calls on local school boards working in collaboration with their local superintendent and health department to provide, where feasible, a fully in-person, non-hybrid learning option for children of all families who desire it. The board also urges local school boards to implement solutions to protect teachers and staff who are in a high risk and to provide for those families who continue to desire a remote learning option for their children during this time. We have discussed kind of key factors of consideration. Those key are, number one, student and staff safety. Number two, adding to the spread of COVID-19. In other words, are we seeing links spread or cases in school setting? And as mentioned earlier, we are not. And number three, school district operations. Are we able to operate school given the mass amounts of quarantine? As referenced earlier, our quarantines are significantly down, which is really great news. We are not seeing link spread occurring during the school day among staff and students. So a couple other just points. In preparation for a possible all-in return, I have asked each principal to review our comprehensive plan that we've authored for an all-in return, in particular for lunch. One of the things that was unique about our hybrid, disparate from many other districts, is we didn't feed kids on school site. So when we return all in, we'll need to be clear and well planned with respect to how we're going to feed students in school and ensure that we'll be able to use all of the varying locations throughout the school to ensure 6-foot distancing while kids are eating. Clearly, they can't eat and have their mask on. So that's, I've already charged principals to evaluate, plan for, and dust off that plan. We have even explored the idea of possibly getting a large tent to feed students and so as to provide increased capacity for that 6-foot distancing while eating. Currently, the prevailing view by principals is that they will be able to maintain 6 feet of distance for lunch using all spaces to eat, including classrooms, gyms, cafeterias, and media centers without needing tent space. We are also exploring the option of students being able to go home for lunch, provided this is done consistently by parents. In other words, if there is a situation where a parent would like to pick their son or daughter up for lunch on a consistent daily basis, they follow a protocol and procedure established by the building principal, that would be something that we could also allow for. Our current plan for recess does include remaining in our classroom pods and wearing a mask. This is particularly important for contact tracing purposes. In the event that someone in the classroom tests positive, them playing on recess in those pods would help with contact tracing. The move from half day to full day will be a change for our students who have to wear a mask all day. We will have embedded mask breaks as much as possible. However, outside of those students will be masked at all times, including recess, lunch when they're not eating, and mask breaks and breaks. That will be a change going from wearing a mask 3 hours to 6 hours. In particular, I would imagine more challenging for our younger students. Just something to be mindful of and well planned for. Should we choose to return all in would significantly decrease our ability to maintain 3 to 6 feet of distancing at our current levels. It would more likely be 1 to 3 feet of distancing in classroom settings. This would increase the number of students that will potentially have to quarantine when there is a positive case in the classroom. In particular, it could also have implications for extracurriculars if they're outside of that 3 feet. Again, masks will be required to be worn all day. We'll also engage in other mitigation strategies to include plexiglass, hand sanitizing, washing, trying to maintain 3 to 6 feet where able. However, importantly, one of the biggest and most significant changes to going from our hybrid plan to all in is the distancing that we will not be able to maintain. It will be 1 to 3 feet. Franklin County Public Health's current recommendation is to maintain 6 feet, but our understanding that in practice, there are times where 3 feet is going to be the reality. One of the other things that I'm sure all of you listening and on the board have heard, and we've talked about, are this new variant strand and possible unknown implications. And certainly that's something we're just going to have to be attentive to. Again, with the dramatic decrease in positivity rate, case rates that we're seeing, and every belief that will continue, there's no reason to think that it won't. So just to review, last vaccines administered on Saturday, February 27th of staff. Experts outlined that it takes a minimum of 14 days to realize the full benefit of the COVID-19 vaccination. Therefore, given this, there seems to be some logic in considering the first all-in student day to be on or around March 15th. This would be 14 days after the last staff member would have been vaccinated. So again, just something for the board to consider in terms of a timeline. Just a couple other important dates that I wanted to provide to the board. The fourth quarter does start March 11th. Spring break for Grandview is March 22nd to the 26th. Therefore, if we were to return on March 15th all in, then this would be 1 week before spring break. And, again, something just to think about the pros and cons analysis there. Would it make more sense potentially to return after spring break on Monday, March 29th? And that be the first all in K-12 return. I think in and all in return, I think it's important just to, and I know I've said it and I'm sorry to be so redundant, but I think these things are important to mention that, an all in return isn't a return to normal as we remember it. It is going to be wearing a mask all day. It is going to be hand sanitizing before and after every class period or in increments of an hour. It is going to be trying to maintain social distancing where able. It is going to be wearing a mask on recess and playing with your pods of a classroom. There are, as you know, significant requirements with respect to quarantine and likely when we go all back in, or should we decide to go all back in, there's going to be a bump in quarantine requirements. And, I think it's just important to mention that because, I happen to have 3 sons myself, one of which has had 2 separate 14-day quarantines. And, the thought of a third is certainly, from my point of view, frustrating, but understandable given the requirements that we have to follow. So I've, again, as I mentioned, spent a good deal of time here talking at you. Wanted to take a pause here and give each of the board members an opportunity to reflect on many of the things that I've said and give feedback on their perspective and insights on an all in return.
Well, I guess I'll just open the discussion for the board. I have a few thoughts and questions, but I'll hold on those for for a few moments so I don't monopolize the discussion here. or I
one
can
que-
start.
One question that pops up for me, Andy, you mentioned that there would be a likely increase in quarantine. Would there be any plan, because we would be full-time with students in classrooms, there would be no synchronous activity from teachers? Would there be any option for a kid that's either in quarantine or choosing not to come to school? Would there be any option to have a broadcast from the classroom that they would be able to attend from home? Is that at all feasible?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a couple thoughts on that. First and foremost, Florida Virtual Learning School is certainly an option for anybody that is uncomfortable with an all-in return, if that's what the board decides. And that option has been and will remain available to our students. So secondly, I heard your question to be somewhat nuanced, and that was more targeted towards quarantining of families and students that are choosing to go all in, not Florida Virtual Learning School, which I think is a really important question. And so here's my unfiltered answer, and you may agree with it and you may not. I think this notion of broadcasting learning into a classroom would work in older grades. And we could debate about whether that's 7th grade, 8th grade up. And I'm sure there'll be others that will even agree with me or disagree with me that it would work in elementary school. I just can, and my experience and observation, and even being a former elementary school teacher, albeit for 1 year, the ability to retain attention of younger elementary schools by live streaming a class, I think is problematic and challenging. So having said that, I do think there are options for our doing that, and that is happening in high school in particular. But I'll real quick, because I think this is important. And I'll try not to get into the weeds of it, but I think from a level set understanding, this idea of quarantining. So as you may know, the Franklin County Public Health has lessened the rigidity of quarantines from, it used to be 6 feet, now it's 3 feet. And if you are exposed to someone that's COVID positive in a classroom setting and wearing a mask, but sitting 4 feet away or 3 feet away, you are quarantined for all extracurricular or non-school functions outside the school day, but you are still allowed to attend school wearing a mask, etc., unless you begin to become symptomatic. What I think is important is in our just for understanding, again, I don't think this is necessarily a reason not to go all in, but it is important for all of us to understand. In our all-in model, there will be far more incidents of less than 3 feet. And so correspondingly, there will be more incidents of quarantining.
Mr. Culp, you kind of segued too, but I have a couple questions. You said with the 6 feet's the gold standard. We have that in most of our situations right now, not all, but most. But when you were discussing just now and a little bit ago, you said that it's going to be less than 3 feet. Now, would Franklin County, 2 questions. One, I want to know how much, and you may not have that answer now, like you could get back to us, me, whatever later. How many instances or how many classrooms would that affect where it's going to be less than 3 feet? And would Franklin County Public Health sign off on us putting students back in, knowing that because it's been 3 to 6 the whole time. 6 is the gold. If we're physically putting kids in less than 3 feet of space, is that something that Franklin County Public Health is like, you can do that? Talk me through that.
Yeah, so I'll start with the latter part of your question. Franklin County Public Health stance is 6 feet is the gold standard, but they're tolerant of 3. My sense is they are not going to change that recommendation. So correspondingly, and all in return would be our doing, understanding that we will, so there's no ambiguity. Let me be pretty direct here. We will not be able to maintain 3 feet of distancing and an all in every situation. It just is not going to happen. It has to do with square footage and so on and so forth. And it just, that's just going to be our reality. In terms of Franklin County Public Health signing off, I don't think that they aren't signing off on an all in return, or quote unquote endorsing. I would say, however, that they will review plans, they'll consult with districts, and be amenable to working with them if that is the choice that the board makes. But certainly that is not their recommendation.
Because I know from my day job that we got kind of the okay for different things. So for me, I'm kind of like 3 to 6. Everybody likes 6 feet, but the 3, but then I'm like, I know you don't have this information in front of you, but before I really want to make this decision, I want to know how many kids are going to be less than 3, or maybe how many classrooms like that. Again, I know you don't have this information.
Well, I can't give you exact figures per classroom, but I can pretty clearly, with a high degree of confidence, say to you that in a traditional in just about any K-12 classroom, with the square foot size of our classrooms and the number of students and all in would have, that we will not be able to maintain it. We'll be able to maintain 1 to 3 feet, but we will not be able to maintain 3 to 6. And that's pretty resolute. Now, there might be one-offs there. For example, high school choir has been meeting in the auditorium. So, there might be an example, or would be likely an example, where they could maintain 6 foot distancing. Band has been spreading out in the high school gym, in the hallways, and the band room. So again, there might be an example where they might be able to maintain 6 foot distancing, but the vast majority of classrooms are just not going to be able to do that.
But I appreciate your honesty and your answer, because to me it's, like going all back in. I know we're not gonna all get 6 feet. I know that, and it's okay. Putting kids in classrooms where there's less than 3, while I understand and I appreciate your honesty, like, yeah, it's gonna be less than 3. That puts a different slant on things. And I think one of the things that we have been successful with so far, with the spread being so low, if minimal, in the school, is because we have the distancing. So it's kind of like, when we take this safety component away and put this in, how does that change our safety thing? It's not.
Well, and Molly, if I may,
information.
I think this topic that you're getting at really articulates the tension, in my judgment, between a desire on the board's part to get everyone back all in.
Well,
with juxtaposed with this challenge or tension of less
Right.
than 3 feet.
The safety is paramount in my mind. And I'm going to cut myself off because I'll talk again. I know I will. But it's knowing that we're sending a lot of kids back in with less than 3 feet, whether I like the answer or not. That's something that we need to know before we make that decision, because there's some things, and it's, I appreciate your candor and just being honest with me about it. Like, yeah, there's going to be less than 3 feet. It's like, okay, that helps me make it with my decision that we are making and the things that we're talking about. So I'm going to pause myself because I know Jesse was talking too. I'm sorry, Mr. Truitt.
well, Molly, one of the first things on my list was about some data and spacing in classrooms, so I won't repeat that. But, I think, systematically where we are is no matter where we land as a board and where you land as a leadership team, we're giving consideration to all in. And so in my mind, where we are today is I think we need to get our answers, or at least let Mr. Culp know what questions we have about what all in looks like. And realistically, because of our time frame, we may, I think that this body will probably need to meet again before the 10th of March, specifically on this topic. So I would like to propose that we have some discussion about not only what would it take to shift, but what that looks like, and we may have some questions such as spacing that we need some data and information back from Andy and his team. I also know that a lot of parents and community members, rightly so, just from a planning purpose, need to sort of know what the process is and what the decision points are and what may or may not happen. That's a difficult task to do when numbers and data and everything is changing. And this is a very real-time discussion. But I think at a certain point, whether people agree or disagree with where we land, which, where we are right now, it looks like, the board would have the option, or Andy would have the option to say, we're going to stay in the current learning mode for the rest of the year. We're going to really go to full time as soon as possible. We're going to go to full time. Let's let it sit in another district for a week or two and see how that goes. There's different options, but as much as some people are very adamant, as we've seen in our emails and public comments, both directions, some people just want to know and are just adamant that they want to know. So with that being said, I just have a quick list, and I don't think we need to ruminate on this a lot, but Mr. Culp, I'll just go through this quickly. You may be able to speak to some now, and some of this may be data that you need to collect and come back to us. I would be real quick, and this could be a little bit down and dirty, but I don't think it would take that long to look at the square footage of classrooms and how many kids are in that room and what that does to square footage per kid, and we can sort of figure out the distancing there. As a reminder, some of our elementary classrooms, I think, are as small as like 580, 590 square feet. You can tell we've been doing facilities work. Whereas I think a standard elementary classroom is 900 square feet. So we do have some facility challenges, but I'd be curious, what that looks like. So if we choose to take that risk, we know what it is. Would like a little more detail around lunch. I do know that medical advisory boards and other districts, the one thing they really hold on to is, boy, people need to be 6 feet apart when you eat. I've heard that pretty loud and clear. And Andy, I think you have too. So I think that is potentially doable, but I think as a board member, I want some reassurance on what that would look like. I think very tied to this, not to open a can of worms, that there's still a discussion about academics, extracurriculars, and athletics. And I do know, you read so much and you try to balance it all, but there's a discussion about the way to get back into school is to put everybody back in school and stop doing everything else, and I'm not proposing that, but I do think, there's options, right? So I think you have the school day piece, the extracurricular piece, the athletic piece, and I think, they all can be just still affected, and whatever we need to do to get kids back in school, and I'd like a little analysis on that, and big picture, what would all in look like for our district? I mean, I think that's important for the board to understand, and that's important for the parents and community to understand. And I'd like to engage in a real conversation around that, whether that's where we land or not. And then I think a real discussion about sort of that timeline. Andy, I appreciate the dates. I, as one board member, would not want to entertain going all in before the 15th of March, just based on what we know with the vaccine, but that's not my decision by myself. So that's really all I have on my list. Those are just things I'd like more information on, and I think that we're going to need to reconnect specifically on this topic. And even though I would say typically at special board meetings we don't allow public comment, but I would, as board chair, would be willing to open public comment because this is because of the topic. At a meeting relatively soon, quite frankly, because I don't feel like I'm equipped with enough of that information to really dig into giving you much feedback. So that's what I have.
echo what Truett said, because just the spacing issue, I had a different mental thought than what it's perceived. Just more information for it. The thing that frustrates me, and we do a good job of it, I think, in Westerville oh boy, sorry, I gave away my day job. We do a good job of it in Grandview here is everything. Then we make a decision, and I don't feel like I have all the components in front of me to do it. So I agree with Mr. Truett, but I also think there's a lot going on with the decisions that we probably 100% need another meeting. And then I'm going to be quiet and talk again 5 more times.
I'll just jump in, and hopefully not too long-winded, but I think, a couple of things really driven us throughout our consideration, from back almost a year ago, when we first were looking at this. And one thing is just recognizing that, all in is the best learning mode, and we know that, and we want to get there. Great to have this opportunity. I think it's also been our approach, which I think has to our benefit, to the benefit of the school and to the students, is to remain flexible. I don't think we've adopted of here we're announcing and the entire semester is going to be this way. There's been so much changing. I mean, you look at the curves and there's ups and there's downs, and it looks good one month and then bad the next month. And we've seen some districts around us that, have announced decisions further in advance. And then that's caused some concern and consternation when they've had to go back and either, change that, or like in the fall when they were locked into staying away, not in person, probably for too long because they had already announced it. So, I recognize, as a parent myself, it would be great if we all knew, the future and be able to say on this date, in the future, let's plan for it now and let's put our stake in the ground. But I think, remaining flexible. Now, having said that, right now the trends look really good. They look at it at the national level, at the Ohio level, at the Franklin County level, at the Grandview level. Certainly, I think we're on the trajectory, and given the vaccinations, which are enormous, I think, Jesse, I'll give you credit that very early on in the discussion, back before the beginning of the year, you were really focusing on, it's as much about teacher health and the vulnerability that we have with, frankly, older, population among the teachers and then of the students. And, that's where even if we want to go in and then getting sick or, needing to stay away or whatever. So, really having the teachers and the staff vaccination is huge. So, right now my thoughts would be as soon as possible once the vaccines fully kick in to get back. I've seen some comments of, it's toward the end of the school year. It's not that long to the end of the school, we've gone this far. But the way I think of it, it's the last quarter of the school year. And given the time that we've had, both fully distant and in hybrid, it's very conceivable that our kids could have as much time in school in the last quarter than they did in the first 3 quarters of the school year combined. So I think it's valuable, really valuable. And if we can possibly maximize that, I would just love to do that and hope that, the trends continue and we'll be in a position to address the problems we have and to move to that mode when we can.
Yeah, if I could jump in now, I actually echo a lot of what Eric says. I think I am sort of in the same place that he is right now with my thinking. More data is definitely good, always good, measured approach, make sure things trend in the right direction. All of that is good. right now, if things did trend in the right direction, even if, I guess I'm kind of in a place where even if we have data that comes back that says based on the square footage, all classrooms, which it kind of sounds like what Andy's close to saying, pretty much all kids are going to be in that less than 3 foot range. Now, even with that said, I don't think that halving the distance means you're doubling the risk. And I've said this to a lot of people over the last couple of days as people have talked to me. To a degree, this is a very subjective decision, and it's about risk tolerance and how you weigh what level of risk you're willing to take for the benefit of in-person school. And my thoughts have shifted on this throughout the pandemic as I get new information and see what happens, in a lot of these schools that have gone into in-person learning successfully. I think that lunch is not insurmountable. I think we can overcome that challenge. I want to be measured. I definitely want to be conservative, but at this point, if things continue the way we think they will, I'm feeling increasingly comfortable with the idea of kids going all back. And with Eric, if everything, plays out as we think it will, I would be comfortable with them going back, once the vaccine's kicked in for everyone.
Kevin, do you want to go or do you want me to talk?
You can go ahead if you have a specific, comment.
I think I'm not to where Mr. Bodie and Miss Gephardt are. I agree with their thoughts. I think that I've been every place during the pandemic, like no and yes and all over the place. My concerns are a couple things, 5 probably. I want to see the numbers keep trending down. I think we are on the path to go back in. I don't know that we're on the path to go back in 3 weeks. The data to me, I want to see those numbers down. Now, our dashboard is a framework. I would love to see us in orange. I would love to see us in yellow. I think just personally, I would love to see us go away. To me, I'm like, we're trending in the right direction. I don't know if March 15th is our day. To me, I have a very hard time sending kids and everyone back to school for a week, going to spring break with that. I will be very honest. I'm very nervous about travel for spring break, the numbers and the data's with that. And I tend to not be a nervous person, but I'm like, to me, I don't think we're where we need to be. The other thing that I want to think about, and this is my day job coming out, the educational shift that's going to happen with going full day. Are we sharing art supplies? Are we bringing lockers in? The granular details of the teaching day. There's that. We're one-to-one, so that's an excellent thing for this. Are we going to shift from, instead of Chromebooks, we have textbooks? Are we going to shift from, we don't have asynchronous work, we do? The shift in the learning day, how is that going to play out? Grandview does a great job with their leadership with talking to our educators, and then, what are the pitfalls? I want to see some more of that. Like, how is this gonna, there's a big shift happening. I do think in the bottom of my heart, I want the kids all back in. We all we're all ready for this to be done. Like, let's be honest. And if our kids are back in school, that check, we're getting back to life. We're getting back to this. I don't want to rush it and then open a new can of worms up that if we had waited a week or two might not have been there. The other thing too, with the new variant coming out, does it affect kids? Does it not affect kids? I'm reading that it does. I am only an armchair epidemiologist. I'm not a full doctor yet. That comes next year. But like, to me, I'm like, I'm in the heart. I'm in the frame. I'm like, I want us back in. Are we there yet? And I'm like, I don't know that March 15th we're there yet. I want us to be, but I don't know. And to me, taking a pause, seeing some more data, yeah, you know, that's where I'm at. So with that, I will pass it off to Mr. Gousset.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in seeing more data. And we're planning on having another meeting here, it sounds like. So we can follow things for the next week or two and continue to see where things are moving. One consideration is with travel over spring break. If we were not in close proximity and people coming back from travel started to show symptoms, then they would be able to quarantine themselves, obviously, and they wouldn't necessarily be affecting other students. A big concern of mine is that students that are all in are going to have to quarantine, especially after spring break. That's definitely a concern. Now, if numbers continue to trend downward to such a degree that cases are going to be so low that that's a factor that's, becomes negligible, well, now I might change my decision. So I'm definitely interested to watch the numbers over the next 2 weeks and maybe have a decision at the next meeting. If numbers continue the way that they are now, I think I'm with Mr. Bodie and Mrs. Gebhardt.
I do, but to follow up on something Molly said that I really do agree with is the need to see that minutia, the details of what a school day looks like when it comes to, like she said, like supplies and lockers and stuff. Those aren't, because we haven't really entertained the idea of going back fully in person through this school year. Quite possibly, Andy, you guys did work all this out and we just haven't gotten there because there was no need for us to know that. But it would be interesting, not just for us, but I think the whole community to know what does a day look like for kids and could allay some concerns, I hope, or find places where further improvements are needed.
I agree with that sentiment. And I think that's, when I talked about wanting more data, it's not just for, us as a board. I think the communication to our families to what all in looks like, one, for potential comfort level, either way, whether you're comfortable with it or whether you're not as a parent. And two is to be able to talk to our kids about that. I think it's going to be real important that our kids don't understand that school is still different. And in my professional world, I'm one of those guys that has been working in schools that have been all in, and I was in one in Trotwood today, and the distancing is there, the one-way hallways are there, the way we eat is there. There's a lot, and I know the team's been working on that, but I think for the board and community, we would just like to dig into that a little bit. As a reminder from a process standpoint, in my role, I think it's important to understand that this board has decided, to give Mr. Culp as the superintendent the authority to do this. And so where you'll see other boards of education and in the county, a lot are doing it like us and some aren't. You'll see a board voting on every modality change. And in this situation, we've given that authority to Andy, but obviously, he consults with us, and that's why we're having this discussion at this meeting. And that's why, just given the time frame, I'd like to propose that we do reconnect before that March meeting. We've gotten emails and public comment from, obviously, first of all, I want to appreciate, the emails that I was able to read today that came as a result of your update, Andy. I'm always impressed with the community's thoughtfulness, respect, understanding for the position we're in. And so, no matter where you land on this, I do appreciate that. And I know Andy appreciates that. One of the comments the people, some of the folks that want to go all in right now. What I'm sort of hearing from you, Mr. Culp, and the board, and I want to make sure I'm not making this assumption, is, if we're going to entertain going all in, it wouldn't be before March 15th. And if that's the case, let's just say it now, whether people agree or disagree. And so that kind of gives us not that March 15th is the day, because I'm also hearing some variance on the support around that. If we know it's not before that, then I would just like to say, hey, look, the earliest would be after that vaccine was full effect. That's where I am. I think that's what I'm hearing where everyone's at. And, with that being said, I think we could connect either next week or the last week in February. And I would encourage, obviously we can't deliberate outside the board meeting, but if there's specific questions or data points that you want Andy and his team to bring to discuss to the board, just email that to him directly. And then, we can have a good discussion about what an all-in looks like, and, maybe a brief discussion about what the data looks like between now and when we would have that meeting. I mean, does that seem like a reasonable next step?
Yes, it does to me. I would, if I may just add, and, so in preparation for this meeting, I've over the last 2 weeks, I've had a lot of conversations with principals and directors, and in preparing for the potential of an all-in return. And one of the things that we did was we dusted off, I don't know if you all remember, our Grandview Heights plan for learning and modalities. It was like a 58-page document. Are you guys recalling that document? Okay. So in that document, it has not all of the answers to the questions you've asked. It doesn't. Like, for example, it doesn't have classrooms per square foot and the number of students in them and so on and so forth. But it does have a lot of the specificity around lunch, recess, art supplies, science supplies, plexiglass dividers, one-way hallways, all of those. And so I will reshare that with the group, which may help drive additional questions to all of you as well.
And I would hope, I know when we were first having these discussions, getting your hands on certain PPE supplies was a little more difficult. I just know the salesman emails you get now, like, it seems like if we wanted to put a plexiglass divider around every desk, there might be an expense to that, but I think it's physically possible. I'm not saying that's a good idea or not. I'm just saying, like,
yeah, we're not short on plexiglass in Grandview right now. We have a lot of plexiglass, and we have.
I mean, I don't mean to get in the minutia right now, but I do think that we will need to at some point. So, I guess at this point, do we talk about, when would make sense to reconnect? That would be a special board meeting. I would entertain, and frankly, as the chair, I have the right, would say that we would allow public participation at that meeting, even though we typically don't at special meetings. I think this is an unusual circumstance where we'd want to hear those comments and weigh that with our discussion, in my opinion.
I agree with you. May I ask too, and this is something else. We've all essentially agreed that nothing before March 15th, correct? Yep. Mr. Culp has the opinion, or has the authority to change that, but we're all kind of on that same page that nothing before March 15th.
I think there's some logic to that, given our desire and what the feedback of wanting to see more data, as well as that would be 14 days past the last vaccination, which is, vaccination of 90% of our staff is a significant mitigation strategy or, factor.
Right. I do ask this one, and I hope I don't throw a wrench into this. If whatever we decide, or whatever we talk about, take to Mr. Culp for that decision. If we are deciding to go back in, or what have you, can we give, and there may not be an answer to this, but I think we need to give people, we're flexible. but a couple weeks heads up. Childcare arrangements, everything. My mom brain just started rolling through everything that might need to happen, and it could be a wrench in this floss system. Or is that something that we would at the special board meeting possibly decide? Because it's
I mean, I think the answer is, that would be the time frame, the timeline of all this. I think is a big part of the discussion.
fair enough.
And that's why I personally would like us to, our next official board meeting is March 10th, and I don't think we can have a discussion about potentially coming in, 2 days before we do that. So to that end, I would propose meeting next week or the last week in February, within the next 7 to 14 days, a pretty quick turnaround. And then, that's still getting us a couple weeks out from the March 15th date, if that was an option to do that. And then that would really give Andy's team some time to really talk about, the first day of school, it's almost like a new first day of school. So how do we approach that? You could even argue a phase in sort of thing. You have half the kids the first day all day, the other half second day, I think all in like we do at the beginning of the year. Maybe that's a horrible idea because of childcare. As I think about that, my own kids, I'm like, wait, maybe why am I suggesting that? But there's things I'd like the educational team to really consider. And I know you have, Andy, and I don't mean that to be insulting. I know you and your team have been working on this, but when the possibility is really in front of you, it changes everyone's lens. So I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. So, I would propose, and I guess I just look for dates that I'd like to set that now so we could let the public and let people know when we're going to reconnect. And I'd be up for doing that. Really, for me, I think sometime between the 17th and 24th would make sense.
I'd just throw out, I think the 24th makes a lot of sense. I mean, it gives us 2 weeks to learn more and for Andy to prepare. And I think, far enough in advance that, it wouldn't be a last minute decision.
That's the night that we're doing the Board of Education. That's when we're doing our evals for the superintendent and treasurer.
I mean, either we could say this is the priority, which I think we can, and either move that to something else, or, if we want to double up, I think we can.
I would really propose, I know that Dale McVeigh and Andy and Beth, you guys know that this board, takes the evaluation of superintendent treasurers, really one of our main functions. But I would like to delay that. I worry about, sort of adding too much together.
What I like about that date also is it's in close proximity to the Tuesday updates that I get, which is like hot off the press. So I will have had that right. We'll have 2 more Tuesdays and hopefully really great news to celebrate.
So why don't I know that Haley and Dale McVeigh that works with us on his valuations are going to kill me for saying this, but I think we move that down the road. These are unusual times. This is obviously a priority, not that the evaluations aren't. Besides, we may want to see what Andy brings to us before we do his evaluation. No pressure, just kidding. But let's do that, and then but let's make a commitment that by the end of March that we do wrap up the evaluations, because that's an important part of our operation and our duty as a board that we cannot ignore. Is that okay with everybody?
One consideration, just to throw a wrench in it, a lot of us will be getting our vaccine on that Tuesday and Wednesday. And I know with the second shot, there are sometimes side effects. It's just a consideration. Will we want to be doing that meeting while having side effects?
Just gotten his. He's excited.
Yeah.
Does anyone mind saying like who will be getting theirs Tuesday or Wednesday that would be in that place? That's a lot.
Monday the 22nd.
The second, my wife did have her second, and the next day it took 12 hours, but like about 12 hours after the second round, and she's tough as nails. There was a period of time there, I'm going to say like 8 hours, where she definitely was not feeling good, for sure.
Well,
Who knows? Everybody reacts differently, but
let's do the 22nd, if that works. I don't know everyone's schedule. So let's look at Monday, the 22nd for a special board meeting. Once again, we're not taking action. However, we'll offer public participation, the sole topic being learning modalities for, Grandview Heights schools. I'd really encourage and the leadership team to, bring us lots of information and lots of different thoughts. We are a small district, but when I think we are paying attention to other districts. I will say, Andy, you said this before. Andy meets with the superintendents of every district in the county weekly, shares some of the information with other districts are doing. We have learned a lot from other districts, good and bad, that sometimes drives our decision and sometimes doesn't, because the districts are so different in some ways. So I appreciate that, but I think you'll also have that sort of information. I think that the board and community would be curious about. I know some districts are looking at just elementary going in, and there's so many different variations. I sort of, on a personal level, like to keep it somewhat simple, but let's have a discussion on February 22nd. Do we want to do that at 7? Do we want to start a little earlier, maybe at 6? I think Molly
It might be a long one. I'm okay with 6 if that's what we want to do. I'm okay with 7 though, either too.
Can we do 6 o'clock on February 22nd as a special board meeting? And Andy, if you can go ahead, let's go ahead and post that with the agenda quickly, so that the community knows that that's happening. And then that begs the question: do we want to still do the meeting on the Wednesday for the evaluations, or do you think? I'm okay either way on that. It's going to be a busy spring regardless.
We could have school board week.
Okay.
Hang out together.
So let's I tell you what, let's tentatively keep the Wednesday there, and then depending how these vaccines go, if we're not able to have quorum or not everybody to have everything there, we can adjust. But that's already on the book, so there's no reason we can't. That's a all executive session meeting, so we're not. If we have to cancel it at the last minute, it's fine. Okay.
Yeah, and then also maybe around that same time when we're discussing, whether or not the kids will go back full in, we might have the same discussion for us too, whether we're going to resume in-person meetings at some point this spring.
I emphatically second Emily's. It's very hard making a decision for students virtually. Yeah. That's hard.
Well, in the same vein, I think a lot of people will be vaccinated by mid-March, and by the end of February, but effective mid-March. So,
Mr. Culp, can I ask, and you may know this, educators were rolled out for the vaccine February, March. If you could bring it to the meeting, when are other rollouts? And I feel like I should know it, but I don't know, do we have access to when more of the general population is going to be vaccinated too? Because it's vaccine, safety, school day, that all is a part of our decision.
But I'm going off memory, but in the last governor's press conference I watched, he was going to stay at 65 and older, which was like, I'm probably wrong here, but I felt like it was like 3 million people, and that he was going to be there for a while.
That's what I thought too, but for some reason in my head, I'm like, April's ringing bells for something. Again, I could be making this up. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll look into that though. I can find that information out.
It's just the whole puzzle.
The focus of the presentation will be about all in return on our scheduled date. I just want to make sure that I meet your expectations. My plan is to focus on an all in return and our plan correspondingly for Grandview Heights. Yeah, which again, I think we have it. I'll just we'll get it brushed off and adjusted to, February 2021.
Okay. Any other comments or discussions on that topic? All right, we're halfway down the first page of our agenda. We had an organizational meeting on January 13th and a special meeting on January 3rd. Can I have a motion for the approval of minutes for both those meetings?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Beth, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bodie,
Aye.
Mrs. Gebhardt,
Aye.
Mr. Gousset,
Aye.
Mr. Truitt,
Aye.
and Ms. Wassmuth.
Aye.
Next, we have our reports, 3 reports, building and department reports. Once again, thank you for those. The comments, I will say, I know in the report it mentioned the Grandview Singers performance, and I believe that links in the report. That's worth a watch if you haven't. That's actually pretty remarkable. And there's some Bodie influence in that. And then I was really pleased to see the high school's got a mock trial team that's doing really well. I know that when we moved here many years ago, that didn't exist in Grandview Heights High School. So, whoever's been a part of pushing that, I think that's great. So any other questions or discussions on those building and department reports? All right, we've got the superintendent's report and then the treasurer's report. So I know you've been on the spot a lot, Andy. So if you could briefly do your superintendent's report.
So we have had a myriad of activities to celebrate Black History Month. As you know, this is Black History Month. And so we're proud of those activities to further enhance what we're already doing. As Jesse Truitt mentioned, Grandview Heights mock trial team has had an incredible virtual performance on January 28th. It was so impressive that they're moving on to the regional competition February 19th. So that's just really great. Your Good Man, Charlie Brown is this year's musical production. As mentioned, Mr. Bodie's son is involved in it. I actually saw him, Eric, at Brugger's Bagels on Lane Avenue the other day while I was running over there to get a bagel, by the way. So he does a fabulous job, and look forward to more information about that. As mentioned, January, and I apologize for the month delay. January was Board Appreciation Month, and so I hope you enjoyed our small token of appreciation that was delivered to your homes today. Great news that around 90% of our staff, the state average is around 70%, have gotten will have gotten the Pfizer vaccine by February 27th. A big shout out to Billy Sarich and Liddy McLaughlin. Both have announced their retirements. We wish both of them much, much happiness in their retirements. We're in the process of working on District Quality Profile 2021, which will be serving as our winter newsletter and will be in residents' mailboxes soon. I had a really awesome opportunity to meet with the class of 1959. And for whatever reason, this class and I have really bonded. If you recall, Bill Boardman and his wife Nancy donated $250,000 to our construction project. And for whatever reason, they like to meet with me periodically. So I had the distinct pleasure and opportunity to meet with them. And they're just a really great group of people who just love Grandview and love Grandview Heights schools. And it truly is a joy to be able to meet and connect with them. So that pretty much concludes the report.
I was muted. Any other questions for Andy? All right, Beth, you're up.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I've got a few updates to share with the board. Okay, so just to review some financial data as of the end of January, looking at our general fund, the tax collection cycle is currently taking place with the Franklin County Auditor and Treasurer's Office. We have put in requests to get weekly advances of those funds. To date, we have received just over 3 million of advances. We will continue to receive those weekly advances until that final settlement is made. That is expected around late March. So with what we've received so far, we're at about 68% of our fiscal year budget for tax revenue. Our state funding, about 60% of the budget. We did receive our second half casino revenue payment in January, and that was just a little over 30,000. Interestingly, because of the shutdown of the casinos back in 2020, our first half payment was about half of that. So that is some good news there, seeing that revenue bump back up. So the property tax allocation, that's the homestead and rollback reimbursements, and the Grandview yard revenue will come after the final settlement, the tax settlements in late March that I mentioned. Interest revenue for our general fund for January was just over 8,000. Expenditures, our fiscal year-to-date budget is about 58%, and our expenditures came in at about 55.2%. So we're about 3 percentage points there under our fiscal year budget. So that's good news. One other update I wanted to provide, as all of you know, we partner with Meter Investments to kind of carefully look at our cash flow needs and invest those funds that are excess that are not needed for immediate operations. And in doing so, I have added an additional $1 million to that U.S. Bank investment account to invest to those funds. So what we keep in our liquid account is Star Ohio. That is 0.09% right now, interest rate return. The weighted average of those investments with our US Bank account is about 1.4% right now. So while that's not a great percentage either, it's certainly a whole lot better than the Star Ohio rate. So we are carefully looking at that and maximizing what we can invest. The construction fund, January interest was just over 9,000. Our project to date interest earnings, 1,255,000. Soft costs, we have spent about 49% of that budget, and construction costs about 22%. The fund balance is about 41.5 million. And as you all know, that started at 55.25 million. And so we're gradually seeing that drop as we pay those construction bills. Bond retirement, there's no new information here from last month. We've got transfers coming up in April for the TIF revenue used for debt service. Permanent Improvement Fund, we got with the tax advances we get that I mentioned for the general fund, we do get those advances for the permanent improvement levy as well. So we've received about 112,000 in the PI fund, and that fund balance is just over 717,000. And then lastly, I wanted to give just a quick update on a couple funding issues. So our fiscal year 21, the year that we're in, our state funding, as you probably recall, we started out the year at funding cuts that were in place last year. Well, some good news we have received is that Governor DeWine signed an executive order that restores a portion of those funding reductions. So that's a little bit of good news for us. We started out the year with a net reduction of about 144,000. And this executive order restores about 79,000 of that. So all in all, that leaves us at about a $65,000 cut compared to pre-pandemic levels of state funding. So, so if you think back to just back to last May, you know, our state funding cut started at 321,000. So, so you know, to get that down to a $65,000 cut. I think that's, you know, puts us in a pretty good position. The fiscal year 22 and 23 budget proposal was also just released in the last week or so. And that puts K-12 education funding at pre-pandemic levels. So whereas we're down about $65,000 this year, that would take us up to restore that 65,000. So again, that would put us at what our funding was in fiscal year 19 before the cuts at the end of fiscal year 20. And then finally, just a quick update on the ESSER round 2 funds. So that's the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, part of the federal pandemic relief funding. We received a first round of that funding along with what was called coronavirus relief funding. So kind of two different pots of money initially back in late spring, early summer. And those two together totaled about 100,000. This round of funding for us is going to be about 231,000. So we are looking at using a portion of that for some summer programming. Ohio Department of Education is really stressing and encouraging districts to prioritize those funds for learning gaps or learning loss that has occurred. So we're looking at spending about 80,000 of that 231 on summer programming, and that's from kindergarten through 12th grade. And then the remaining funds we expect to use on additional safety supplies, PPE, and those funds can be used retroactively to last March as well. So we've spent well over that amount on safety supplies already. So anyway, the portion that we don't use for summer programming, we will use to offset those costs that we have actually already incurred. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Beth, thank you for that. If there's no questions from the board at this point, I'd offer a motion to accept the January 2021 financial reports and payment of the January 2021 bills.
So moved.
Second. Any other questions or discussions? Finance Committee moved and seconded. I think we're good. Beth?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wasmith?
Aye.
All right, moving on. We have the resolution that Joanne Taylor spoke to that we have already unanimously approved. So we're going to jump to 7, business and finance, recommendations from the superintendent, action by the board. If I could have a motion for business and finance 1 through 7.
So moved.
Second.
I think Molly was a little bit before you on that.
She can have it.
Any questions or discussions on any of those items?
Jesse, just to say the Summer Kids Club fees, I really want to thank the leadership of the Kids Club and Beth, who have been at multiple meetings with Emily and myself and Andy and going over on the finance committee. I thought they've just been extremely thoughtful and flexible as we've gone through the different phases with Kids Club, and it's been a real financial hit, but they've been able to continue on, and I think in a way that has put the burden of if this were another situation, it could easily have been hey, raise rates 30% or something, to try and recoup some of the actual costs. And so I think they've just done an excellent job of holding the line. And I think what was proposed, again, is very thoughtful. We've gone over it in Finance Committee, moderate increases, but on top of, really, Beth, you'll remind us, it's been years really since there's been an increase. So just, I think, really thoughtful and respectful of parents' pocketbooks while still delivering a quality product. So just wanted to give a little shout out to say that's been thought through and supported by the Finance Committee.
Appreciate those insights.
Yeah, I piggyback on that because people who do use the summer program are going to notice that there's an increase. But everything Eric said is exactly spot on. I mean, they were well thought through. There haven't been increases in the past, and this program is not making money right now. The Kids Club it's taken a hit. but Amy's done a great job presenting to us.
Good to hear.
And maybe just to point out that there has been a cash reserve. There's a fairly decent cash balance built up from tuition over the years. And so that's really what's been allowing the Kids Club to continue operating. So good, thoughtful planning in advance from years to be able to be in the situation they are.
There's no other questions and discussions. Beth, could you call the roll? Business
Mr. Bo-
27.
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassmuth?
Aye.
We have 7 items under personnel. That's the agenda of 7. Can I have a motion for personnel 1 through 7?
So moved.
Here a second.
Second.
I do have one comment, and Andy, you may too. I know you've already mentioned your superintendent report. I don't want to gloss over the fact that we have 2 significant retirements as the first item on there that we'll be accepting tonight. These are both folks I've known since we moved in the district, and I actually had the children of both these folks when I was a high school principal, and just phenomenal people and great educators. And I know I'm not doing it justice because I didn't work firsthand with either one of them, but just great people. And as much as I'm sort of a fan of virtual meetings, the one thing where I think we don't get to recognize retirees and people like that as much in these settings, but certainly a big loss to the district if those were 2 retirements, but very, very well deserved, and want to congratulate those 2 individuals.
Yeah, well said. I mentioned it in my superintendent's report. Fantastic educators, tremendous people. Would be glad to have any one of my 3 sons under the care of either of them in a New York second. So we certainly will miss both of them.
There's no other questions or discussion. Beth, can you call the roll on personnel?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
Ms. Wassmuth?
Aye.
We have 3 items under co-curricular activities. I do have a quick question before I ask for a motion. And, I do notice that we're approving transportation potentially by van for groups of kids of 4 to 10. And I would worry about, I know you don't know how many kids are necessarily going to this. I'd worry about potential social distancing. So I guess I would propose that we make the motion under B where it says transportation by van and or parents, that we amend that to say by van, bus and or parents. And so
I totally agree.
If you're in a situation where you need to do a bus, you probably would have done it anyway, but that way we're officially.
I totally agree.
So, I guess I'll go ahead and make that motion for C1 through 3 with the field trips, adding bus between van and under B for both of those. Can I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Any other questions or discussion? Beth?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
Ms. Wassmuth?
Aye.
Items for discussion. Does anybody have anything? You probably put that at the front of the agenda, right? I do not believe we have any reason for executive session. Is that correct, Mr. Call?
Correct.
All right. If that's the case, then I would ask for a motion for adjournment at 8:49 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Beth?
Mr. Bodie?
Aye.
Mrs. Gephardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassmuth?
Aye.
Emily and Eric, I just full disclosure, I'm probably 50-50 on your meeting with the city tomorrow.
Thanks for sticking in. I know you're not feeling well, Andy, so appreciate the yeoman work and staying with us this whole time.
Yeah, we'll
We're at
report
it.
back. We'll report back. Your voice doesn't sound great, so go rest up.
Well, thanks to everybody. I think this was good work tonight. And I know that we've got a lot of work ahead of us. So I appreciate everybody putting the time in and the research, and we will reconnect relatively soon in about 12 days. So, thanks, guys.